So the Packers had their final practice of training camp yesterday. So I want to come in here and give my 5 biggest takeaways from this Packers camp, from this Packers preseason. There's still one more preseason game tomorrow at noon against the Seahawks. So that should be fun to watch this team one final time before we get to see them week 1 against the Bears in Chicago. But first off, my number one takeaway, thank goodness Brian Gutekunst drafted Jordan Love. Because now, if the Packers had not decided to take Love in 2020, we could be in QB no man's land with Aaron Rodgers traded to the New York Jets. I know at the time it was a shocking move to see the Packers use a first-round pick on Jordan Love. But now I think looking in hindsight, this was a wise move. The Packers did the similar thing with Aaron Rodgers when Brett Favre was on this roster. And I know that even now people say that, well, the Packers could have drafted XYZ player at that time and maybe that would have gotten them to the Super Bowl instead of stalling in the NFC Championship. But I think that it's not as simple as that, and I think that this is a Packers organization, a Packers front office that is always going to prioritize the quarterback position. It is clearly the most important position in football, and if you do not have a solid quarterback, then good luck having a somewhat competitive team. And so the Packers are always going to prioritize that, even if it could slightly hurt their current circumstance. But I think the Packers love the ability to train up Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers, just as Rodgers did behind Favre. And so far in this preseason, it seems to have been a wise move because the way that Jordan Love has played, the way that he has progressed over these past few seasons in Green Bay, it looks like he, could be the real deal. We've seen lots of nice things from him, not only in this training camp and these preseason games. He clearly has the talent and the ability, and I just wonder now, can he do it consistently? But I am glad the Packers drafted Jordan Love. Next, we have this wide receiver room. So the Packers wide receiver room may lack veterans, but they definitely do not lack talent. So this is one of the most inexperienced, youngest units at receiver in the NFL. The Packers were willing to move on from Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb this offseason with Aaron Rodgers also gone out of Green Bay because they wanted to allow these young players, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, who are now the oldest players, the most experienced players entering their second season in this Packers locker room. They want them to get a ton of experience with Jordan Love and hopefully, build that chemistry with Love, and so this team can continue to be successful and grow on that success in the following years. And I've seen rankings that have said that the Packers have one of the worst receiver rooms in the NFL, but just because this is a young room doesn't mean that they can't be productive even in their first year. Maybe there's some more hiccups than typical in a wide receiver room just because when you have players who have barely played, they're going to make some mistakes. No doubt about that. They're probably going to make some mental mistakes. But this is a room full of, top-tier talent, top draft picks when it comes to second-rounders. Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, you throw in Luke Musgrave as a tight end who can basically also line up, in the slot as a receiver. The Packers have invested a ton in this wide receiver room, and we all know the Packers have had tons of success drafting second-round receivers, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, Greg Jennings. And so now we have Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, and then Romeo Doubs I think is going to have a huge year. And when you have Matt LaFleur in the offseason saying that Doubs reminds him of Devontae Adams, that shows you the kind of talent the Packers have here. And so it's going to be fun to watch these guys develop and grow. And I think in this training camp we've seen the potential that they really have. We've seen Christian Watson continue to improve on last season. We see that speed. We see that ability, physicality, power he has. Same thing or similar thing with Jaden Reed. We've seen lots from him in training camp. It seems like almost every single practice he's catching a touchdown pass from Jordan Love. And then throwing, Doubs looking nice in the preseason. And this is a very, very solid wide receiver room in Green Bay. Third thing, the Packers' second-year defensive players are developing nicely. So last year we all thought, or at least I'll speak for myself, I thought this would be a top 10 defense. I really did. It didn't turn out to be that way. Ended up as the 17th best scoring defense. But I think the 3 defensive players here entering their second season could be pretty crucial in determining, how far this Packers defense could be. With Devonte Wyatt taking over for, Jaron Reed / Dean Lowry, I think that there is much more upside in what he can be as opposed to those players, neither of whom were first-round draft picks. Devonte Wyatt, on the other hand, has that top-tier talent, top-tier athleticism, and so it looks like he's really taken some big steps forward, at least from different reports coming out of training camp. So he looks to be taking that next leap forward. We have JJ Enagbare, who, if you watch the last preseason game, showed his dominance, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, and throwing him in there behind Rashawn Gary with guys like Lucas Van Ness with depth on the edge. And I think it's a very deep edge rusher room in Green Bay. And considering, teams, sub in and out and switch up their edge rushers throughout a game, to have a guy like Enagbare coming into year 2 as a 5th-round pick, he looks like he is going to be a investment that will pay off coming into this next season. Then finally, Quay Walker. So last year, Quay Walker, he was the leading tackler on this Packers team, but he definitely had his ups and downs. He was one of the worst graded run defenders at linebacker in the NFL per PFF with a 35.1 grade, which ranked 87th in the NFL. And so I think that if we can see him take that leap with Devondre Campbell, that'll definitely help this Packers run defense, considering just how poor he played against the run last year. But I think we've seen lots of great things from these guys throughout training camp and the preseason, and I think that it's very common. It almost always happens. A player taking that year 1 to year 2 jump. It's very simple. Getting more experience, having more time out there, a full off season, a full season under their belt, and they just come out, mentally knowing what to do and physically preparing and coming into a new season with a full season under their belt. So those guys look to be taking that next step forward. Fourth thing, the Packers' offensive line isn't playing any games. So this is an offensive line that last year was one of the best in the league, especially when it came to pass blocking. They were the 3rd graded pass blocking unit per PFF, and that looks to be continuing this season. And I think that the fact that this offseason or in this training camp, we pretty much have our offensive line already situated, not really any injuries right now. Last season coming in, we were dealing with David Bakhtiari coming back from that ACL injury, as well as Elgton Jenkins returning from his ACL injury. And it wasn't until maybe mid-season, late season, that the Packers really had the guys they wanted out there consistently at the positions they wanted them to play at. And so now entering this season, I think that this is going to be one of Jordan Love's greatest weapons. We saw last game, the Packers didn't allow a single pressure against a pretty solid Patriots defense. So this is a unit that has tons of depth, with Rasheed Walker taking that year 2 jump. Yosh Nijman still a solid tackle there. And the fact that you can move a guy like Zach Tom from right tackle to center to guard if you need him to. This looks to be a very good unit, and they've played really well in this preseason. Then finally, a final takeaway. There could be way more takeaways, but I just wanted to simplify it down to 5. But Anders Carlson still has yet to find that consistency. And so he has yet to find it so far as a 6th-round draft pick, replacing Mason Crosby. The question is, can he find the success? Can he find the consistency? I think the Packers believe he can. They drafted him knowing that he could potentially take some time to develop, and he has yet to really find that smooth sailing consistency that I think all of us hope we can see from him. But I think the Packers will give him more time, and we'll see if once the season gets going, can he find that consistency? Can he consistently hit these kicks and not miss PATs, not miss 40-yard kicks? Because if that happens, there's going to be some concern here among Packers fans. But so far, we have yet to see it. Hopefully, he can work that all out, and the Packers can coach him up and get him where he needs to be. But those are my biggest takeaways so far from this training camp. It's going to be fun to watch this final preseason game tomorrow. And if you guys want to stay up to date with all Packers news, feel free to subscribe. But that is it for this one, and I'll see you guys next time.